Today, we are going to be talking about the Green Bay Packers potentially making the postseason because right now, if they win out, they have a 93% chance of... Oh, no. 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 Joe, stay away. No! No! Grossi Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to an episode of Podcast, the podcast where you don't have to be a Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom. Yeah, their Packers could actually make the playoffs. Grossi, and today we are going to be going down the path that it would take for the Green Bay Packers to make the postseason. And listen, after that Chiefs game, I thought this was going to be a no-brainer. It looked like the Packers were going to stroll into the postseason. And then the Giants game happened, and then the Buccaneers game happened, and now we're here. So what I wanted to do on today's episode is talk about what it would take for the Packers to make the postseason, who we need to be rooting for, against, and how they could potentially be playing in January and hopefully get some of that experience or get blown out by the 49ers again like we usually do. So, just to get started here, you had the New Orleans Saints lose to the LA Rams on Thursday Night Football, and to be honest, we needed both of those teams to lose, so it kind of worked out. It would have been a little bit better if the Rams lost, but the Saints, the Packers already hold the tiebreaker over the Saints, and now they are sitting there at 7-8, and we are at 6-8. So, the Packers don't really need to worry too much about the Saints right now. The other team from the NFC South that we do need to worry about besides the Buccaneers is the Falcons, because the Falcons, they did beat the Packers earlier this season. So if the Falcons are contending for the NFC South title, that's a big old problem because that would push the Buccaneers to a wild card spot, who also have the tiebreaker over the Packers, and so that would be bad all the way around. So let's go in and talk about what the Packers need to do. Let's get this out of the way first. The only way we're talking about the Packers making the postseason is if they win out. They're currently sitting at 6-8. If they win all three of their last games, they would be at 9-8. Their games are as follows: against the Panthers, against the Vikings, and at home against the Chicago Bears, week 18. So without any games being played, the Packers are sitting at like a 22% chance of making the postseason. If they beat the Carolina Panthers on Sunday, that bounces up to 28%. They beat the Vikings and the Panthers, that goes up to 59%. They beat all three, that goes up to a whopping 93%. Now, could they still make the postseason while losing one of these games? Absolutely. It gets a little bit more difficult. If they beat the Panthers and Bears, but they lose to the Vikings, the Packers' chances of making the postseason goes down to 7%. And if they beat the Panthers and Vikings and lose to the Bears, that goes down to 17%. So again, not really too great. We're only talking about the scenario if the Green Bay Packers wind up winning out. Now, here are the teams that the Packers need to worry about right now. It's the Minnesota Vikings, the Atlanta Falcons, the Seattle Seahawks, and the LA Rams. Like I said before, I'm not really worried about the Saints right now because they have a 7-8 record. The Packers hold the tiebreaker over them. So worst case scenario, they finish at the same record. The Packers have the tiebreaker over them, so we don't need to worry about them. So Saints, don't care about them. So, the Minnesota Vikings, they have an interesting schedule. They play the Lions twice, and then they play the Green Bay Packers. And so, what the Packers need in order to make the postseason, they need the Vikings to lose at least one of those games against the Detroit Lions. Now, of course, if the Lions win on Sunday, they win the NFC North, and we're not talking about the Packers winning the North. That ship has sailed. We're talking about just getting into the wild card. And so, they need the Vikings to lose either this Sunday or their Week 18 matchup against the Detroit Lions, which I think is very likely. The Vikings defense, while definitely improved, their offense, they're rocking with Nick Mullins right now. So I think the Lions, especially after beating the Broncos, should be able to take care of business. So if the Lions beat the Vikings on Sunday, that already takes care of the Vikings because the Packers are going to be playing them on Sunday Night Football on New Year's Eve. And so the Packers would then have the tiebreaker over the Minnesota Vikings. So the Vikings, they need to lose one game against the Lions. and it's looking good for the Packers. Then this second scenario involves the Atlanta Falcons, who are currently sitting at 6-8 as well, but like we said, they have the tiebreaker over the Packers. Their next 3 games are against the Colts, Bears, and Saints. So, to provide at least a little bit of comfort here, we need the Falcons to lose one of those games. I think it's likely they're going to lose one of these games, potentially all 3. Arthur Smith and the Falcons are struggling right now. They did just lose to the Carolina Panthers. So, they lose one more game. That means that they're going to be a game back from the Packers, so that tiebreaker is not going to matter. And again, that would provide some security for the Packers. Now, this is where things are going to get very, very interesting because there's 2 teams that are causing the biggest problems for the Packers making into the postseason. And no, I'm not talking about the Packers themselves with Joe Barry. I'm talking about the Seattle Seahawks and the LA Rams. The Seahawks had a massive win over the Philadelphia Eagles, and while it didn't shift things too badly, it wasn't ideal for the Packers because the Seahawks right now are sitting at 7-7. So, here are the scenarios for both the Rams and the Seahawks. And again, we are just assuming that the Packers are going to win their last 3 games. Because if they don't, well, then their chances drop dramatically for them to make the postseason, and there's no point in even talking about it. So, if Seattle wins out and their final 3 games are against the Titans, the Steelers, and the Cardinals, if they win out, the Rams need to lose at least one more game. And they only have 2 games remaining. Their last 2 games are against the New York Giants and the San Francisco 49ers. Now, the good news is hopefully the 49ers will be still competing for that number 1 seed, which means that they will be playing all of their starters week 18, and they should be able to defeat the Rams because the Rams are looking hot right now, and they are looking problematic. So if the Seahawks wind up winning their remaining 3 games, we need the Rams to drop a game, which would likely come week 18 against the 49ers. Now let's do the inverse. If the Rams win their final 2 games against the Giants and the 49ers, the Seahawks need to drop at least one of those games, and that's against the Titans, the Steelers, or the Cardinals. The Cardinals is probably going to be a little bit tough. I don't imagine the Cardinals will win that game, but maybe the Titans and the Steelers, if maybe Kenny Pickett comes back, that could help. But again, the Packers just need one of these teams to lose one more game. So if it's the Rams, who the Packers have the tiebreaker over because they beat them earlier this season when they had Brett Rippon, we're rocking and rolling. So if the Packers win out and the Rams lose that Week 18 game, and we made sure the Vikings already lost once against the Lions, the Packers are going to make the postseason. And just a reminder for the NFC South, again, you want the Buccaneers to win that division because then they're not going to be competing for a wild card spot, which means the Falcons could theoretically pass the Packers because they have the tiebreaker over them. So let's break this all down and make this super duper easy. Again, the assumption is the Green Bay Packers are going to win out, meaning they're going to beat the Panthers, the Vikings, and the Bears. So what do we need? The Vikings to lose one more game. They play the Lions twice. They need to lose one of those games. Then we need the Rams to potentially lose one of those games if the Seahawks win their last 3. So hopefully the 49ers could get the job done in Week 18. Or we have the Seahawks dropping a game if the Rams are going to win out. That would give the Packers a postseason berth. And again, with the NFC South, you're hoping the Buccaneers win it and the Falcons drop one more game as well. So it's not terribly complicated. As I said, the Packers' path is in front of them. They had their destiny in their own hands, but after losing to the Giants and the Buccaneers, things get a little bit more complicated. But like I said at the beginning of this video, if they win out, they have a 93% chance of getting into the postseason regardless. Now, they just need a little bit of help. It's the Vikings losing a game, which I think is likely. It's the Seahawks or the Rams losing one more, and hopefully the Falcons dropping off one just to be extra safe. So just remember going forward, we want the Rams, the Seahawks, the Falcons, and the Vikings to lose. We always want the Vikings to lose, and probably the Seahawks too, but even more so for the Packers' faith. Now, when it gets to the opinion, can the Packers make the playoffs? Do I think they will? I think there is a very good chance that they do. It is going to come down to those Week 17 and 18 games. I'm not looking past the Panthers, but if they can't beat the Panthers, we're not even talking about postseason anyway. The Vikings, of course, beat the Packers earlier this season, but if the Packers do beat them on New Year's Eve and they lose to the Lions one more time, we don't have to worry about any of that. And so I think the Packers could definitely beat the Vikings. The Bears, I think, are going to serve as a challenge because I know they want revenge from that Week 1 game, and their defense is looking better. But if the Packers can get healthy, like Jair Alexander or Luke Musgrave coming back, we could start rocking here. And again, just keep some perspective here too. The Packers were in a full rebuild evaluation period. We're starting starting with like 25-year-old and under for wide receivers. We basically have no safeties whatsoever. So the fact that we're even talking about this in week 16 is pretty damn awesome. And I want the Packers, of course, to make the postseason. I don't care about the draft pick because I want to see my team get into the playoffs, play meaningful January football, and plus it provides amazing experience for a very young and inexperienced roster. So it could happen. It all starts this Sunday. The Packers need to beat the Panthers, and then we need a couple games to go our way. And hey, we could be sitting in the playoffs this January. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Do you think the Packers have a shot at making the postseason? Let me know. You know, I saw me at Tom Grossi Comedy, all social media see down below. A big shout out and thank you to all the Patreon and YouTube members for supporting this channel. And thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack Go.